So welcome everybody to this webinar by the SPP Scope 3 chapter. So for anyone who doesn't know us, we are from the SPP, the Sustainable Procurement Pledge, which basically is a business network for procurement professionals who are passionate about and believe that sustainable procurement is the future. So we are all business professionals, so we are all working on this every day. And we have organized ourselves in different structures. So we are organized either by country or we are organized by topic. And today you managed to get into the session for Scope 3. So obviously Scope 3 is a very important topic in sustainable procurement. And we tend to organize sessions around, a lot of our sessions have been around data collection. How do you actually calculate Scope 3? What do you do with it? What's the best way? How do you involve your supplier? How do you, make sure that the number that you have is accurate and can be trusted? But today we are going to do something very different. So today we have invited two people from two different business schools who are also working on sustainable futures. So first I would like to introduce to you Leonardo Marquez. Maybe some of you know him already because we've worked with him last year in a series of different interviews with a team that he was leading around paradox in Scope 3 decisions. And we've had a lot of very interesting discussions around that. So he's here today to basically report on the outcome of that project and to show us, I guess, what they did with all the information that we provided. And then the second person that I want to introduce to you is Saman Sarbazvatan, very smoothly. I know Saman actually from a business school that I attend to myself in Paris. And he is all about circular economy. I basically call him Mr. Circular Economy. And I think what we wanted to do is, in the next few sessions, link circular economy transition to Scope 3 and talk about what is the role of, adopting circular economy principles into Scope 3 and how can you actually reduce your Scope 3 by doing those kind of things. So what he will do is provide us a good introduction into what is actually the circular economy. Why do we want to have this in the first place and what does it look like? And from there, I think we will start to organize more sessions to link this to, items and stuff that people in our network are working on. So that's in terms of introduction. As you can see, this meeting is being recorded. So you will be able to find the recording on the YouTube channel, and we will also post it on the LinkedIn page. The Scope 3 chapter has a LinkedIn page. The link is in the chat, so feel free to join that if you are a procurement professional and you are passionate about sustainable procurement and you are focused on Scope 3. And I guess that's it for me. Or maybe let me also introduce to you Luciana Salvatore, who's the other co-chair in the Scope 3 chapter, and Matt Langley, who is sort of just leaving us as a chapter, as a co-chair for the chapter because he is starting a new chapter, but we still consider as a co-chair of our chapter. So having said all that, I think we want to start with Leonardo's story. So maybe Leonardo, can you share your screen? And then the floor is yours. I suggest we just do the presentation first, see if there's any questions. If you have a question, you can post it in the chat and we'll try to answer anything while we are on the go. And then we move to Saman, listen to his story, and then we'll take it from there. Over to you, Leonardo. Thanks.
Thank you, Claudia. Hello, everyone. Good morning, afternoon, evening. We never know where everyone is these days. It's a pleasure to be here. I'm Leonardo Marquez. I'm associate professor at Audencia Business School in Nantes, France. Can you see my slides at the moment? Yeah, and then hear me well as well?
Yes.
So yeah, before we get into the topic, let me just talk briefly about paradox, which is a word that can be, you can look for it in the dictionary, but it actually is actually used in business for a more specific approach. So when you're looking at multiple moments in our life, we face a challenge between a decision between A and B. Easy decisions like you're going on holidays. Do you prefer to listen to rock or to samba? Maybe that's an easy option, an easy dilemma because you may just like one type of music, or whether if you eat fish or meat, maybe you always go for one option and never consider the other. So that's not really attention because you do have two options in the menu, but you always take one path, right? Now, sometimes it's a bit more complicated than that. We are facing two options and we would like to try and get to both of them at the same time. So for example, do you want my career progression or work-life balance? And their attention comes up because you're probably gonna give up a bit of work-life balance if you wanna progress more quickly, or vice versa. And then you can solve that in multiple ways. In paradox theory, we'll say that you can solve that temporarily. So you can say, I will start progressing my career and I will let work balance for a later moment in my life, but I will first prioritize to grow really fast. So you're using temporal separation. You're going to talk about this a bit. You can use spatial separation, which then it cannot be a person, but could be a family. You can say one member of the family will focus on career progression. The other member will focus on work-life balance. So as a family, we're trying to sort this out, but individually, we have someone making a choice. And then finally, we have what we call a synthesis. A synthesis is when we manage somehow through governance, legislation, technology, to do both at the same time. So maybe you find a sector or a country or a condition that allows you to progress in your career and at the same time have amazing work-life balance. That would be a paradoxical solution through synthesis. So that's the type of problems that we're going to be talking about today. We have approached this topic, Scope 3, and during the course of this research, we have managed to get to know the SPP, and we'll tell a bit of this story, right? We'll report a bit on what has happened. But just first, remember quickly say that besides myself, we have other colleagues, Daphne Moraes from Brazil, São Paulo, Brazil, Lee Matthews from the Nottingham University in the UK, and Mark Pagel from Ireland, University College Dublin in Ireland, working together on this project for the last 2 years or so. The journey started, as I said, a couple of, almost 2 years now. We first looked at what was happening there, then we evolved to interviewing specific professionals such as Claudia, and then from there we've managed to approach SPP more broadly as a chapter, the Scope 3 chapter, to organize workshops with multiple people simultaneously, online workshops, and we also organized the workshop in a conference called IPSERA, which is a group similar to SPP, but there is more concentration of academics instead of practitioners. So we gathered understanding from procurement professionals that are heavily lean towards practitioner approach, academic approach, and then hybrid profiles that work in both sides of the equation, consultants that are working on advancing PhD studies and so forth. So we gathered all this knowledge, so that's really bottom up, learning from professionals, engaging with them through workshops, understanding how they discuss Scope 3, and then we are going to be today presenting the results, and I'm very happy. And again, I should now say thank you, SPP, for, well, first, and the Scope 3 chapter, Matt, Claudia, Eric at that time, to allow us to engage with the professionals. And then it's great to be here to then provide some feedback, some reflections on what we found that might be useful for everyone attending the workshop, and then maybe listening to that later as well. So quickly, I'm assuming everyone here is familiarized with Scope 3. So rather than describing, the emphasis here is just a disclaimer to say that you do have downstream Scope 3 as well, but because of the type of professionals that we have been talking to in the last 2 years, we have a bit more focus on upstream. I would argue that anything that I'll be showing you guys today is as useful as for upstream and downstream, but the type of reflections, the type of discussions that we had, and the type of the profile of the professionals that have participated in these workshops, they are usually thinking about upstream Scope 3 rather than the whole thing, right? So just a disclaimer. Now, where were we when we started this type of research? So we realized by, for example, looking at the CDP data, that there was a lot of work to be done, right? By 2021, we saw that 43% of the companies had just defined their targets for carbon reductions in the platform. So many companies are starting this journey from 2019, 2020, so less than 5 years. So we were already assuming we would see some sort of maturity curve and that companies would have to slowly progress, and we would see a lot of challenges, tensions, and unsolved problems. We also saw that only 6% of the companies at the time had already included Scope 3 targets. So the majority of the companies providing data to us, to CDP, were only including their Scope 1 or Scope 1 and 2, but not Scope 3. So again, these position us at the point of the start of the research to say, this is something worth exploring. We have to understand why we are progressing so slow. And then from the initial interviews, we came up with this tension format, which means that we understood the current problems of Scope 3 and we organized according to 6 tensions. So for each of these tensions, participants would be exposed to an option between A and B, as I said in the beginning, career progression and work-life balance, but we're going to see that these are topics related to Scope 3 carbon reduction. And then for each of these, they would first say, is this relevant? So does it make sense to be looking at this tension between A and B? Maybe you can say it's just not relevant because A is not important, B is not important, so forget the tension. That was an option for each of the 6 tensions. And then if this was relevant, how would you approach as a professional? How your company is approaching this challenge? How would you solve that? And then you could see yourself, you'd be able to choose a couple of options during the workshop. A is more important, so it's attention, but is the first type of example that I gave, which I can easily choose A and forget about B, vice versa. I can temporarily separate them, so I can start with A first and then progress towards B. I can, or vice versa again, and then maybe I have to try to do them simultaneously. So that's when I really would like, if possible, to make A and B progress at the same time, right? So we had no clue what we would find. As I said, we had workshops with the SPP group and with the Ipsera group. In total, we had 42 professionals participating in these workshops. We have recorded, analyzed that, and this year we are organizing both this type of feedback workshops, paper publications, and report publications on the results of what we found, right? Now, first, for the first question, which was relevance, I won't take much time here because basically we were very happy to see that they were all relevant. So in this one, you see the first 3 tensions, and I'm going to dig into each of them, so don't worry about the names now. But dark blue is very relevant, and bright blue, light blue is relevant. So you see that the majority for all these 3 tensions were saying that this is relevant or very relevant. The same for the second set of tensions, for tensions 4, 5, 6. Again, blue is dominating the graphs, which is saying that they are pictured as very relevant or relevant. So we quickly could move from question 1 to question 2 because the relevance was kind of unanimous across the board, and all 6 tensions have been kept in the final report because they all have been defined as relevant. Now let's go to what we're looking for after all this preamble, and look at these tensions and the results that we found, right? So the first one, we presented always them as these sentences from a manager, in the words of a manager. So it's between tangible actions and carbon credit certificates. So whether you buy carbon credits to compensate your Scope 3, or you try to engage with concrete actions to reduce your supplier's scope impact, right? Carbon emission. Now here, and sorry, I forgot to say, but we organize these tensions from the ones that have a more clear side to it to those that have a more challenging decision between A and B, right? So the first tension, this one, is that there is less of a tension, actually, and then the last one is the one that the tension is clearer, right? So for the first one, what can we say? Between these two, there was a predominance of answers looking for tangible actions. So here, rather than trying to keep both, there was a skewness towards, well, let's try and do tangible action. That's the ideal, that's the goal. Yet, although the quantitative responses pointed to that, when we dig a bit more into the nuanced discussions during the workshops, we found also evidence that sometimes it's not that easy. I may prefer tangible actions, but I might need carbon credit as part of the system, and I might need them because I cannot reduce Scope 3 right away, because it's a long run that I'm on it, because some suppliers I cannot access, and for them I might need to buy credits to compensate their impact, because they are hard to access, because they are hard to engage in projects, or multiple other reasons. So a few quotes, and I will always be bringing some quotes from professionals that participated in these workshops. It's a bit moralistic that it's better to reduce emissions than kind of offset them, or it's not a bad thing to buy carbon credits as long as it's very clear why I'm doing that. So here we saw that there is actually a huge thing about credibility of carbon credits, and that could be even a whole seminar, right, only on that topic, and the business of carbon credits and how it's evolving. So we found out from the discussions for more in-depth analysis that we have to live with carbon credits. We have to make sure that they are transparent. We have to make sure that we can separate good quality credits from bad quality credit programs, because we will need carbon credits with us, either in the beginning, because I'm reducing too little still, or in the end, because I've done everything I could. I managed to reduce 89%, but is that 10% that I just cannot reduce my impact, and then the credits might get there just to lead me, for example, for a net zero. So it's something that we cannot ignore, right? I will summarize the 6 of them, but I'll be moving now to the next one. It is challenging to cover that in 15, 20 minutes, but I will do my best. So for the second challenge, we progressed to another tension, which was between learning together with suppliers, which means sharing and together coming up with solutions, and sharing with your supplier that you just don't know how to get there and you want to get there together, from a more top-down approach to say, well, I will plan how to do this, I will define practices, and I will push my suppliers to adopt from a top-down perspective, as I'm stronger than my suppliers. We here see, again, a bit of a skewness towards learning rather than top-down approach. But as we dig a bit further, we found out that, well, from one hand, there were people saying, yes, I just cannot do it alone, and I see no shame in asking my suppliers to build this solution together, and to together find ways to achieve this goal that we all have in the supply chain. But there is also a bit of understanding that, well, maybe I should learn a bit, but eventually I would like to engage with some sort of top-down approach, because eventually I like to start dictating the rhythm, because if it's only on learning together, it might be too slow. There are too many suppliers. Maybe some of them won't engage as much as I need, won't follow the pace that I need in my company in terms of carbon reduction. So there is still a tension between building solutions together with a supply base and being able to define a bit more the pace of carbon reduction. Also, there is an obvious discussion that emerged, whether your company is bigger than your suppliers, or your suppliers are bigger than your company, or you have just heterogeneity and different types of suppliers. And through the workshops, we've been talking to retailing, manufacturing, service companies. We had no restrictions of sector, also country-wise. We had people from Asia, America, Europe participating. So there were different responses depending on the background, the context, the type of firm. There is a lot of heterogeneity in these responses, but we again saw here an ideal movement towards learning rather than top-down approach. But you should not neglect that some people were proposing a top-down approach as the main way to move forward. When I move to the third challenge, let me also add that this was really, I didn't mention that, but in all those graphs, you're going to see a lot of diversity. Like this one here, we have 4 of the 5 options, so 4 colors, which means that out of the 5 options, there were votes for 4 options, which means that there was a lot of heterogeneity. We are talking about the predominant path that we found, but there were always, there was eventually an expert going for an option that was not the dominant one, but they had a strong argument to why go that route. So different companies are taking very different approaches to the problem. On the third one, we were challenging focusing on scope 1 and 2 first, and scope 3 later, or trying to move simultaneously. What emerges here is now we are moving closer to the more a paradoxical perspective, as 69% are proposing simultaneous. So the majority is saying we have to do both. So we have to have some sort of plans for scope 1 and 2, and at the same time have plans for scope 3. So there is a mix of, I need to focus on scope 1 and 2 to give the example to my supply base, so they understand that I'm also doing my homework. I need to do that to learn, and then know how to also provide support from my suppliers, or simply I'm leading the way, and I'm cannot lead the way if I don't reduce my own scope 1, if I'm asking suppliers to work on their carbon emissions, right? Therefore, but there is a tension. Why? Because we have resources, limited resources, and a few of the things that emerged, like we have two teams basically. So we had a few people it's a company, it's not a person. Going back to my initial example. So because we are a company, we are a group of people, we can have some people working on scope 1 and 2, and we have other people in the team that will be working on scope 3. And that's how we sort this type of problems in a big company. We have different departments, different teams, but still they're going to fight for budget. They're going to fight for time, awareness of the sea level. So there will still be a tension there. That's why, right? Now, we've covered 3. We have 3 more to go, and I'll try then to build a big picture, what these 6 tensions together can lead us to understand in terms of scope 3 challenge. For the the fourth one, simultaneous is again dominating, but there is the type of mechanisms to manage these tensions simultaneously starts to become a bit different and more elaborated as we go towards the last tensions. So for this one, we were contrasting the supplier disclosure of their emissions versus you, from the focal firm perspective, using estimates, right? So you could use estimates for your suppliers. You could ask all your suppliers to provide actual real data, or you could have a blend. And here we saw emerging solutions such as the classic Pareto. I can say that 20% for my top suppliers, I will ask actual data, but for the 80% of all the remaining supply base, I work with estimates, either because they are too small or because don't have a good relationship. They are ad hoc suppliers, so it will be a bit harder to engage with real, actual and real-time provision of carbon emissions. So I will basically split my supply base, as we do in everything related to procurement. We're all procurement experts, so we also split our supply base when it comes to innovation, when it comes to cost focus, etc. We'll do the same job that we already know for carbon. We'll have top suppliers that you're going to engage really close to them and expect from them real data. Hello? And we're going to have suppliers that will just provide us, we're just going to work with estimates on our own back office, let's say, right? A few comments. We approach suppliers different. It's all about supply segmentation, as I just said, or I will use estimates and then I will double check. So even for suppliers that I ask for actual data, I will still have an estimation database using technology, because I need to double check their numbers, because maybe the suppliers can be faking data or they can be reluctant to update. So I'll always work with estimations so that I have a baseline to contrast what the supplier is giving me to what my estimates are indicating to me. Okay. We move to the next one, where we were contrasting setting targets against building competence. And again, that's a classic tension that we see in other areas as well. Do I first learn about something, or do I set a target that makes me, that carrot that makes me run towards it, and then I will build competence as I try to reach that target, right? A classic tension that is also appearing in the scope 3 discussion, because and here we were explicitly saying that it's a target that you were making transparent, because you can have a target for yourself, like I'm losing 5 kilos in 1 month, but I don't tell anyone. When I tell someone I'm going to lose 5 kilos in 1 month, I'm committing to it. Then someone may ask, how is it going? And then I will be exposed. The same thing here. So the contrast here is whether do you disclose a target and you commit to multiple stakeholders, like your employees, your suppliers, your shareholders, that you're going to reduce the scope 3, and why you build competence, or you do vice versa, right? Again, simultaneously trying to solve that, dominating. I'm using the chicken and egg paradox analogy here. Some people were saying, well, it was even difficult for some people to say, well, what I'm defining first, I just think these things naturally come together. I define a target and I build competence. And then the more I build competence, the more I can commit to more radical targets, maybe more radical reductions. And these things will kind of evolve. So we should find ways to organize that. But there was a predominance of people saying, let's set the target first and then we build competence. But there was also the reverse, let's build competence first and then we commit to a target, which shows the paradox nature of the problem. Because when we have experts that know what they're doing, as Claudia said in the beginning, they're actually working towards that goal. And with such opposite discussions or solutions to the problem, it means that this is a paradox. That is very easy that you may change your mind and decide to go one first, the other first, or ideally both simultaneously, and then you have to find ways to do it, right? And then finally, we had the last one, which was the more technology-driven one, which was the need for actual data versus confidentiality agreements. So to what extent do you expect from your suppliers their data, and to what extent do you respect if they use confidentiality as a barrier to provide you the data you're looking for? And here again, we had simultaneously managing both aspects as dominant, but we had a more clear solution, and it was the clearer of all the tensions. So basically, with two helps here, help from two aspects, we can solve that. One, technology. So we can use technology that will make data anonymous, and yet you get all the data you need. And two, third parties. You can have third parties that will collect the data from your supply base, we will anonymize that data, and you provide the reports you need. So you'll be able to manage your scope 3 using actual data while protecting confidentiality when needed. So that's where we found a solution that was a bit more mature in terms of the synthesis approach that I mentioned to you when describing the paradox. So a clear use of technology and third-party intermediates that allow us to manage simultaneously A and B, in this case, data confidentiality and actual data disclosure, and advance the agenda. Wow. Okay, if you got here and didn't hang up from Zoom, let's see at the big picture what we're looking at. So we are looking at 6 challenges, where the ones to the left are more actually attention, and the ones to the right are more like a classic paradox. So here we have a preference for tangible actions and learning at the top, rather than credits and top-down approaches. But be aware of social desirability bias. That's the last comment I wanted to make, so that we are aware that it's not rare that we will have people responding to this type of questions as they want us to, they believe that we want them to respond. And when we dig a bit further, although they say that one side is preferable, in reality, they know they'll have to have a bit of both. There will be still a bit of top or down, and obviously we won't leave without credits. We just want to make sure that we are doing the right thing, right? And then we had 4 tensions, where we had a more clear paradoxical approach, either through temporal separation. So I do one first and then I do the other, but I can't lose sight of the other. It can be so distant from today, but I can start with one side, the bottom, and then move to the top side of these tensions. I can use spatial separation, such as different teams in the organization, or such as different suppliers, Pareto segmentation. Some suppliers I go for real data, some suppliers I go for estimations. And ideally, I can get to synthesis, where I can, for example, build competence and set targets simultaneously, and I can access data and protect confidentiality simultaneously if I use technology and third parties on my behalf. So it's like unpacking a big problem, scope 3, in 6 problems with different approaches to each of them and with different types of recommendations to each of them. And here I stop.
Thank you so much, Leonardo. I think I see a lot of paradoxes that we actually, focused on in our sessions, a lot around data. Do you start with system? Do you start with supplier? Do you start with a target? Are you first going to build some competence in your organization? I think we've touched upon many of those in the last sessions that we organize. So it's very interesting to see that basically we're on the right track with the type of sessions that we're trying to organize, and we're trying to educate people. So that's really good. Let me just pause there before we go to Saman. Are there any questions that people want to ask now, or should we go to the next presentation and we'll take it after that? Just looking for the chat. Oh, the chat is here.
Yeah, I had a question, Leonardo.
Chat? Yeah.
I mean, when you're designing your program, you're kind of you need to think through all these different tensions, and you need to understand the type of supply chain you have, whether it's product heavy or services heavy, the internal aspects. But in your view, these are the key six, right? That when you're designing your program, you want to understand them and know the kind of tension to be able to get an effective program together.
Yeah, Matt, thank you for that. I mean, we were trying also to see if there was a seventh or eighth tension emerging from the data. We got close to bringing something related to technology. Also, we've considered collaboration, but at the end, we realized that they were actually solutions to these tensions. So we have ended up with a report that has kept the tensions as they are, and just exploring how different the type of solution that you need for each of them, right?
Yeah. Okay. Thank you.
All right. May I suggest that Saman, you start sharing your screen?
Sure.
And go for it. So I think now we go to a completely different presentation that really is focused on circular economy. I think that serves as a kickoff to, so how does this relate to scope 3, and what do we need to know about this as procurement professionals who focus on scope 3? So over to you, Saman.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Leonardo,
Thank
for
you,
this
Leonardo.
very insightful session. Thank you, Claudia, and the whole team for inviting me here. So my name is Saman. I am the Vice Dean of Ecole de Ponts Business School, and I'm a Professor of Technology and Digital and Responsible Innovation. In the responsible side, we have the circular economy. So circular economy is a very big topic that is very close to our heart at Ecole de Ponts Business School. We have a research center, which is highly active with European projects, the leading global institution in terms of funded public projects in circular economy, which I will try to bring a couple of examples as well, just for you to share the context a bit. And with that, I will start my slides here. Please let me know if you can see it. You have it?
Yes.
Yes. Okay,
Thanks.
very good. So the topic is digitally empowered circular economy. So circular economy is very wide, and it can be very deep and very exciting as well. But the focus of this session will be an introduction to circular economy within the limited time that we have, and mostly on the impact and the role of technology in driving the circular economy transition. We are going to talk about, on a non-technical approach, talking about technologies without entering into technicalities, about these digital enablers, these technologies that you can see on the screen, from immersive X, which is extended reality, and blockchain, quantum computing, IoT sensors, and cyber physical systems, and AI, of course, robotics, cobotics, drones, Web3 and digital twins. So this is what we are going to talk about, to see what is the role that these technologies play in terms of enabling the transition to the circular economy. After that, we're going to talk about the new risk and readiness matrix. This is some framework that I have developed myself. This is basically talks about the importance of understanding the responsible transition, including circular economy, and how it basically surfaces critical pillars of success or failure of companies, organizations, nations, and regions and clusters, basically. So we're going to also talk about that, why leadership and governance moving forward is completely different, why strategy and foresight, resilience and competitiveness, and all the rest, why they should be understood and comprehended as complete new matrix of risk and readiness. So this is what we are going to also, as the final sort of outcome, we're going to talk about these. So talking about circular economy, we have to understand where it comes from, right? It comes from the linear economy, which is the old style of doing business that we mastered it really well. We have done it so far since hundreds of years and maybe more even. So the foundational problem comes from the linear economy, in which there are basically three main steps: take, make, dispose. So we are really good at that. We're really very strong in taking natural resources and raw materials, virgin natural resources. In the taking part, we are unsustainable. In extraction, we are unsustainable, unsustainable practices. We extract natural resources from the nature, and the more we need, the deeper we need to extract, the more energy we consume, the more pollution we cause, and the more damage to the nature. So the take part is a big problem. The make part, for sure, we have seen by evidence and research that we have caused tons of issues regarding climate change, biodiversity loss, and the rest. That happens in the making of things. And of course, the human side of it, the unethical practices, and tons of social issues there as well. And the dispose part, it's obvious, of course, with creating mountains of waste everywhere that we have ever set foot at. So these are basically causing problems that cannot be necessarily or easily be undone on social aspects, on economic aspects, on environmental aspects. So that is why linear economy needs to be completely understood as the problem, as the foundational problem that we have. So based on most recent reports, so the most important thing that you want to take from this slide is that only 7.2% of our global activities is circular. So in other words, 92.8% of our activities around the globe is unsustainable and linear. And this is the problem is that it used to be 8.6, but now it's 7.2 within the past 4 to 5 years. So we have done even worse. Since the conversations began, and since the awareness also increased, and since the willingness also has strengthened. But regardless, we see that we are actually doing even worse. So this is just for putting things into perspective. We had 119% of population growth versus 300% in material use. So this is also like the alarming sort of statistics that we need to consider. In terms of some numbers on the screen, as you can see, it's the global per capita consumption has more than 100% increase since the 1980s. 23% of natural habitat will be lost by 2100 or have already been lost, depending on the type of the research and scientific evidence that we look at. And the rest that I'm not going to read on the screen. But the most important thing is that we have, according to some research, and according to some, we are going to surpass very soon in the coming couple of years. What we have made, human-made objects on Earth, is basically heavier than the whole living natural biomass on Earth. And the source is from MIT. I have put the source here, and you can check the study, but it's not very difficult to find these things. So this is also to understand the depth of the problem of the linear economy. So the planetary boundaries that you might have seen, so you can see from 2009 to 2023, things have gone much worse. So all of these, they merit conversations, discussions, analytics, and basically talking more. But in this session, we want to focus on circular economy as an alternative. As an alternative, basically to have more efficient and smart utilization of resources. With circular economy, the objective is to do more with less resources for longer. So that's the circular economy approach. So this is the famous diagram by Ellen MacArthur Foundation. The butterfly diagram has two parts. On the left and right, you have the biological, and on the right, you have the technosphere or the technical sort of structure of circular economy. But what does it mean? It's not very self-explanatory, but I use it here as a reference because it's everywhere that you look for circular economy, you can see this. But I have found better ways of explaining it. So on the left, you can see the linear economy approach. On the right, the circular economy approach. We extract, manufacture, assemble, retail, we add value to the user, and then what happens, the user destroys value because we don't know how to take care of our products after use. In the circular economy approach, as you can see, we have after the usage, the user, we have some activities that we do that we're going to talk about to retain value and circulate back the value, circulate back the materials as much as possible into the value system. So these are the circular value chains that we're going to talk about. So in terms of circular economy, the most important element that we need to consider is the circular design, because objects and products must be designed for circularity. We have a complete set of discipline and doctrines for design principles for circularity, design for disassembly, reassembly, design for repair, that we are going to talk about them. If you remember, now we have brands such as, for example, Fairphone, that basically the argument is that you do not need to change your phone every couple of years only because the camera quality is much better. So you can only change the camera of the phone. So the Fairphone brand, also they have laptops now. So those are like designed for circularity, designed for disassembly, designed for upgrades, designed, for different types of Rs that we are going to talk about. So this slide is very important to just show the dependence of various aspects of circular economy together. So circular economy has three main principles. One is to narrow down the loops. So basically narrowing the loops by using fewer resources, slowing the loops by extending the life cycle of products, and closing the loops by maximizing material use cycle. Basically, if we don't have any waste, then that's the closed loop economy, which is not very easy to manage. But then at least we can slow down the loops, which means that we need to have more efficient use of resources. And for sure, we need to narrow down the loops, which means that we introduce less natural virgin materials into the circulation. So these are the 10 R's of the circular economy. They start from refuse. So this is the first step, right? So this is the first step. So recycling has wrongly been used as a good approach for circular economy, which is completely wrong. Recycling economy is outdated already. And it was at the time that we didn't know about the other 8 steps before. So recycling is just one before the last. The last is recovering. That's basically when we burn material to just recover the heat out of it, or some part of things that can be used in other places. But before recycling, we have many other steps that we need to do, that we need to consider them. So it starts with refusing. So now what does it mean? Refusing starts on the top. That's like the higher it is, so the more circular it gets. On the top, you can see the 3 first steps are smart product use. The 4 middle ones, they are extending the lifespan of products, right? And the last ones, they are useful application of materials. So recycling is one to the last, as you can see. So recycling is not the best that we can do. We do recycle if we cannot repurpose. We do repurpose if we cannot remanufacture. We remanufacture if we cannot refurbish, and the rest, right? So this is really the approach that we need to have in mind, that recycling is not the best that we can do. Refuse on the top is the best we can do. Refuse to produce, refuse to use, refuse to have virgin materials as much as possible. Then rethinking about how products can be used more intensively, such as the sharing economy that we have already overtaking some industries, such as the fashion industry, for example. So this is very insightful as well to understand the circularity and the approach that we need to have. So now, when we're talking about the digitally empowered circular economy, the reason is that the linear economy is very, causing a lot of damages to our social, economic, and environmental landscapes. We have alternatives of circular economy that are enhanced by technology. Circularity is a competitive edge. Policy initiatives and strategies are pushing and providing support for more circular economy practices. We have increasing pressure and support from stakeholders, from investors, from consumers, from producers, and the rest on circular practices and approaches. And digital transformation is increasingly enabling the circular transition. So this is how we are moving toward the digitally empowered circular economy. We have increasingly, we hear in the news or we see around us, especially in supply chain management and procurement, as you are all experts in the field, that major companies are basically losing their contracts when it comes to transportation, for example, simply because they cannot provide the required amount of transparency on their activities and their natural footprint and carbon footprint. And according to research and practice, main reason for that is over complexity of our global supply chains and tons of outsourcing, insourcing, tons of interdependencies that are happening. According to reports, they have basically no idea what is happening in their value chain and supply chain. So it is very complicated for major organizations to provide the type of transparency, the level of transparency that is required, not only by policy initiatives, not only by the regulatory landscape, but basically for users. Users now want to, according to research again, users have a tendency to buy more sustainable materials and even to pay more for it because the global awareness is increasing, because we can no more neglect and ignore the repercussions of the linear economy and many other more. So when major companies have such problems and challenges, startups come and take their place. We have many reg-tech companies, regulatory technology companies that basically step in. They're startups. They don't have much to lose. They just come up with a solution. They can address a challenge that is very difficult for companies to manage. So that is how we see like this type of pressure and support is really killing the big organizations and businesses in supply chain and procurement that cannot provide the level of transparency that is requested and required by stakeholders. So technology basically builds visibility into our value chains. We're going to see how, right? I mean, it builds intelligence into assets, provides solutions for resource efficiency, help us track, monitor, and manage our assets better. So basically, we are doing more with less for longer. It helps with traceability, analysis, and reporting, and provides the provenance, transparency, and accountability that is required for the transition toward the circular economy. So coming back here, already I think you can guess which type of technology can help us with what elements that we talked about. Blockchain helps us with trust. Basically, this is the technology of trust. It provides the provenance of data. It provides how the data are where they are coming from, how they're being treated. IoT sensors, connected everything, cyber physical systems and all type of sensors. They help us with tracking, basically monitoring our assets, understanding, the condition, the availability of the asset. How many of our assets are just immobilized and it's just going to waste, which drives us to the sharing economy, for example. And AI and machine learning and big data and analytics, they basically help us with data analysis, reporting, better understanding of the patterns that we have in consumption of raw materials, or the circularity basically of our supply and value chains. So these are the type of technologies that are helping us with the more digitally empowered circular transition. For example, in the fashion industry, as one of the top polluting value chains and supply chains, we have some technologies that come together, such as blockchain, cloud analytics, digital twins. They provide supply chain management and transparency. They provide digital passport, digital product passports. Like this company that we're going to talk about, they provide a birth certificate for production process in order to have tamper-proof and reliable information. They facilitate lifecycle tracking and the rest of post-usage, which is rental, sharing, resales, repair, and recycling. So this company is called EON, E-O-N. So they have a solution, they have a compliance solution, digital product passport. As you can see on the screen, they basically provide all the information about the sourcing of the raw material, basically of a product. They help with more visibility into supply chains, like we call them see-through supply chains. You're the experts here. But of course, this is increasingly required by not only the public policy and regulatory bodies, but also by investors, also by consumers and the rest of the stakeholders across the value chain, right? So this company provides and facilitates the type of the information that can be shared, can be basically highlighted for the stakeholders. So DPP, Digital Product Passport, this is one example. You can basically see the production data on the product, the chain of custody, for example, how many times the product has gone through repair, or for example, how many times has it been resold, the technical documents of the materials, the material composition. So all of these, they go to the digital passport of the product, right, which is mandatory by 2030. And already we have a lot of front runners that are basically innovating in terms of how sustainable and how responsible and how circular they can be, and they can provide services. So EON basically captures, validates, and shares the data. They collect the data, they validate the data, and they share the data across the value chain. It's a B2B solution, basically, but of course, as a B2B2C, also they add lots of value across the value chain and supply chain. So they give you a dashboard that you can have all the information, you can have all types of tracking, with fantastic technologies that we saw on the screen, that they can basically help with more transparency on the supply and value chain and procurement processes. So this is how leadership and governance is going to completely change moving forward. This is how multi-stakeholder ecosystem design is going to completely shift competitiveness and strategy of companies. This is how operations, supply chains, and value chains are going to be transformed. This is how processes, solution design, experience design, service design, everything is going through a massive transformation. So the circular economy transition is going to change all of this. And more than that is the responsible transition, which includes circular economy, ESG, SDGs, DEA, diversity, equity, inclusion, accessibility, all types of socio-environmental welfare practices that we talk about, they come under the responsible transition. And together, they are completely reshaping the risk and readiness matrix toward Industry 5.0, basically the next industrial revolution. As other type of examples, this is like a public, private, and third sector sort of partnership example, EU-funded projects that we work on with our Circular Economy Research Center at Ecole Business School. This is one of them. Shared Green Deal is basically to stimulate shared actions on Green Deal initiatives. So basically working on social science and humanity to support the EU Green Deal policy. So this is one of the major tools that is heavily funded by the EU, and lots of companies, technology providers, academic institutions, consulting companies, accounting companies, different types of investment firms, they come together to collaborate, to shed light on the challenges and opportunities, and to drive the transition to the circular economy. Other projects that we are involved in is Ideal Cities, which talks about increasing inclusion of citizens, effective response to crime and other emergencies. CIoT is basically leveraging IoT connected devices, cyber physical systems, in order to interact more between circular economy and the stakeholders. Smart Ship, as the name suggests, it's about shipping. Basically, the project is fascinating. It's focused on energy efficiency, fuel consumption, and management of emissions. And this one, Biophoenix, is also super interesting. It's bio-inspired. It's about creating computational DNAs, learning from the organic structures in the same way that every day we have, as human beings, we have tons of viruses and microbes that our bodies are fighting against, and we don't even realize, because our organic systems are so much intelligently designed to do that and to recover and to self-organize, that we don't realize. Sometimes we have some symptoms and we realize, but if not, as you know, most of us are carrying tons of viruses and bacteria every day with us. So learning from the same system, this project aims to create resilience of softwares, basically, against hacks and other type of damages that can make software unusable, in order to help them self-reconstruct and self-reorganize and moving forward. So these are the projects, some examples that we are engaged with. Our doctoral students and graduates work on these. The executive DBA program that we have, they join us and they work on these type of projects if they are working on the specialization of circular economy, or here, for example, specialization of technology. People come from IoT or blockchain or AI or digital twins, and they just work on these type of projects in order to drive this sort of multi-stakeholder approach to the circular economy transition. Our MBAs also work on them, but not directly on the EU projects, but they work in the background, if you like, in terms of okay, I have an Ecole. Yeah, found it. So that is how also we engage our students, our alumni, in these type of projects, to make sure that in terms of awareness and application of the knowledge that they acquire, they really contribute to the overall advancement of the circular transition. This was the example of smart ship that we worked on. Basically, in this one, we worked on telematics, monitoring, management, and maintenance. We worked on cargo and goods flow tracking. I mean, a big part of supply chain and procurement, of course, is through the sea. And now this project was an example. Now we're working on spatial transportation, aerial transportation, terrestrial transportation, and of course, maritime transportation. In order to, of course, energy management, mobile data hubs, connected fleet, and smart ports, and all of these fascinating aspects are all parts of circular economy. So circular economy is super exciting, can be very, very interesting to work on. And for sure, it's something that we definitely need moving forward. So this is how also they can help with scope 3 emission in supply chains, because based on the data that we acquire, like the result of the fantastic research that Leonardo shared with us, they definitely and directly provide more insight and foresight into the fight against emissions. So these technologies, again, we come back to these technologies. So these technologies are driving a lot of change in terms of supply chain, value chain, and procurement. And each of them, they have a complete, world of information, of innovation possibilities. And of course, they cause lots of challenges as well that needs to be managed. So this is where we talk about the importance of education, because if upskilling and reskilling is missing, then we have no view on that. These are some examples of policy initiatives, strategies, and directives, and measures, and standards that most of them, from extended producers responsibility, CSRD, which I'm sure that you're all experts of, ESRS, and digital product passport, and circular design, and the eco-design directive. So these are all the pressures and support that are driving the innovation toward the circular transition. So this is, again, coming back to the risk and readiness matrix, closing with this one here. So the importance of skills, intellectual capital, talent, capacity, and mindset. So what happens is that we are completely moving toward a new paradigm. So this paradigm shift requires new set of knowledge. We need to understand how the technologies that we talked about, how scientific advances and digital transformation and innovation can be used as an enabler for the circular transition, for ESG, for SDGs, for CSR, for all types of responsible disciplines and doctrines. So upskilling and reskilling plays a major role because we are dealing with 3 generations as we speak. Those in the governance and decision maker on the top level, the middle managers and the frontliners, and then those who are studying now and they want to join the workforce. These 3 generations are heavily impacted. So what happens is that if as the leaders and the governing bodies of a company, of an institution, of a nation, of a region, of a cluster, of an industry, if I do not understand what technologies can do for me, if the only thing that I understand from blockchain and Web3 is cryptocurrency and Bitcoin is bad, how can I train the next generation of leaders? How can I have leadership succession planning? How am I going to support innovative approaches to transform my supply and value chains, right? So the importance of comprehending technologies, understanding how they can support us in positive ways and what are also the challenges that they can bring on board. If I don't understand them, not only I'm killing innovation, not only I will completely lose my competitive edge and the resilience toward the upcoming territories of competitiveness, not only that, I'm not only doing any good to the next generation that I am training. As middle managers, if I don't understand them, I cannot connect the new generation with the decision makers and the governing and the leadership ones, right? And of course, as those who are finishing their education to enter to the workforce, we are a bit less worried about them because they are more tech savvy, but we need to make sure and understand that they do understand how technology and the responsible transition can link together, how innovation must follow a digitally empowered, responsible approach, and how we can really gain on competitiveness and resilience and foresight and strategy, how to communicate about circular economy, how to communicate about our sustainable practices, how to communicate about our ESG and SDGs and everything else. Do we communicate or not? What if we don't? What if we overdo it? What if we do greenwashing? How to avoid that. So all of them are super important and highly strategic conversations that we can have in terms of upskilling and reskilling. And as a professor and as a business school, it's our responsibility to talk about them. It's our responsibility to join these very interesting sessions, to share our humble knowledge and to share what we are doing, what needs to be done, and how we can support decision makers, executives, innovators, investors from across the sector into the right direction. Because basically we are talking about losing competitiveness, losing that positioning in the upcoming markets. If decision makers, if leaders, if investors, if innovators, they do not understand and comprehend this, what happens is that in the unfolding frontiers, in the emerging futures of digital and responsible businesses, societies, and markets, they will not have a position. They will completely lose competitiveness. They will not exist. So thank you very much. And I stop talking now.
Thanks very much, Saman. Yeah, I mean, that's why I'm one of those doctoral students at the Ecole Business School. So I'm really trying to upskill myself in all of these concepts, and I find it massively interesting. I really see how we can reduce, so many emissions, water usage. Like we have to redesign everything from how we used to do it. So I find that very interesting. I do see that people are starting to drop off. I guess people have other meetings, on top of the hour. That's fine. Feel free, to join that meeting, of course. I think we scheduled the session until 15 past the hour. So let's just, go with what people, if people have any questions. I do see a question on the chat from Majazuddin asking to what extent the digital product passport goes in terms of material and energy transport and use. So I guess to what extent does this, what's the scope of it? And who can access this? Is this a passport for consumers?
Leonardo, whenever you feel comfortable, just jump in. I just fill in as much as my limited knowledge allows me. So digital product passport must be accessible by all stakeholders. So that's the mandate. So basically, in the same way that a passport,
is it a EU mandate?
it is driven by the EU, digital product passport, initiated by the EU. But so the point is that with the EU regulatory framework, with the CSRD and the rest as well, it's not now only about the EU, because now basically, if you're a foreign company, if you want to have any exchanges with European companies, you have to be able to provide the level of transparency that is required by the regulatory body. In other words, if you're a Chinese company, you cannot say, I don't care, I can do whatever I want to do. We have many companies, many partners in China that they're working with the EU, within the EU market, and they have to abide step by step the regulatory process of the EU, simply as long as they want to have any type of exchange, commercial exchange, academic exchange, any type of exchange with the EU market, they must abide and they must follow. So digital product passport is, for us, is really known by the EU Commission, but it's globally relevant and pertinent.
Cool, thank you. Yeah, I mean, we are only approximately 20 people, so anybody who has a question, feel free to just unmute yourself and ask the question. Like, we're not that big of a group, so we can do it a little bit interactive. I think, Matt, I see you unmuted yourself. Do you want to ask a question?
Yeah, I do. Saman, so I work for CBREs, that's in the real estate or built environment. It's almost 40% of global emissions, and a reasonable amount of that is around operations. What I find with circular economy is that in the built environment is that because the assets such as office furniture and even some of the structures of the buildings have like a zero value on the balance sheet, then they're considered that they're just not worth anything. And so, I mean, we've got a good example of a client in London that consolidated 5 buildings into one, and then bought £5 million worth of furniture. And we kind of got in at the end and said, well, why don't you reuse some of it? And they're like, well, it's not worth anything. It's zero on the balance sheet, so we could buy a whole lot more. And so I find that because carbon doesn't have a price, and people with circularity thinking, if there's a $0 value, then there's a zero price to that. Even though when you buy new furniture or build a new building, then you have to obviously bring in more carbon as you buy the products and services to do that. Do you find the same in your research, or that we sort of need a price for carbon really for circular economy or circularity to kind of become more important and more front of mind?
Yes, well, as you rightly mentioned, so there's not always, like, everything do not follow each other in a well lined up way. For example, sometimes we need, like the paradox that also Leonardo mentioned, sometimes we need policy, but sometimes the policy is not supportive for better practices. So what happens is that we cannot always follow the policy, saying that if the policy is not pushing for it, we don't have to do it. So there's a big part of it that comes from the willingness and the support that the stakeholders need to bring themselves on the table, because as we know really well how the public policy also works, is that they cannot push all of a sudden everything. And so one of the logics behind the carbon credit, for example, that Leonardo also spoke about is about pressure, which is constructive, but it's not a sudden pressure. So as we can see, like the limit of carbon credit allowance, for example, is reducing over time. So that is how the market is going to react and respond. But the short answer is that yes, unfortunately, it's not always the case that we can rely only on regulatory and policy practices. But on the positive side, if we want to look at them, is that at least they pave the way. At least they allow us to innovate within a safe sort of framework but it doesn't mean that we should not do whatever that is not required or not pressured upon. So your argument is true, especially about the facilities that you mentioned. It needs to be like in the culture of the organization. So that's why like upskilling and reskilling plays a major role. For example, here at school, we do not buy furnitures like you mentioned. We always rent them. When we have like major events, we always rent. We never buy. While it might be more wise, financially speaking, to buy them, but just for them, as a matter of principles, we only rent them when we need 100 chairs. If not, we just say, well, we refuse to have resources immobilized here when we are not using them. So it's like a sharing economy principle. I think the big part of it comes from the organizational culture. And that's a fantastic example also for upskilling and reskilling.
Can I jump in with just a reflection? Because I think that carbon plays a major role in the circular economy, as you said, because two quick comments. First, some products, when we start upcycling products, because they are actually coming from waste to a certain extent, there is also a consumer awareness dimension that people expect to pay less because, I mean, I'm buying not necessarily secondhand, even if they have received some sort of upcycling activity, maybe some energy has been put there, you're using it for the second time. People often expect to pay less, but actually on a low scale startup stage, it can be more expensive to provide this type of products until you gain scale or a policy support that makes you compete with the virgin materials, right? So that's one dimension. And the other one is that it is when you think about extended producer responsibility, for example, think about legislation, is often that current legislation, and someone let me know if you agree with that, but drives us a bit towards recycling, which, as someone showed, should be the last step. So we've been working with some colleagues from Finland. We are trying to understand how could policy drive reusing and reducing, slowing other steps that come before recycling, so that we could eventually drive these strategies and leave recycling as the last stage. And then again, because recycling, it's easier also to calculate carbon when you're recycling than when you are just extending the life of the product. How do you factor that into how much you reduce carbon by extending the life? So there is a bit of I think there is room for a lot of research there.
Yeah, I mean, I'm hopeful as companies come with an internal carbon price and start using that, then even though maybe externally carbon doesn't have a price, at least internally it does. And so there are some good companies, multinational. Bayer's one of the large sort of later ones that have done that, and Microsoft and things, to try and drive similar behavior. Yeah, thank you. Thank you for those responses.
Thank you, Leonardo. I mean, in fact, as you mentioned, like sometimes, I mean, it depends also on our perspective. Sometimes we have a feeling that the pressure is not enough. It's like sometimes we have a feeling that there's a lot of political economics involved. You know, talking about what can be done better and what is basically pushed for. Like recycling is pushed for, but we can do better. Why don't they do it? Well, to some extent, the market is not ready, the consumers is not ready, you know, the culture is not there. And to what extent then we ask ourselves questions such as the renewable energy versus the fuel industry, right? The classic fuel industry. So these are the things that unfortunately we see. But again, most importantly, I think it's the culture, our organizations and individuals, and the increasing level of awareness that we need to really drive forward to make sure that we are on the right track.
We have a comment from Majasuddin online, who says, if I may add to what Leonardo's statements, perhaps the tax breaks and incentives will be pushing the users and the manufacturers to stick to the circular model. So yeah, I guess that's definitely true. We're all waiting for those kind of things. I think we've come to the end of this session. I hope that the participants have found it very useful. For us, you know, we want to organize more sessions around circular economy. If there's anything that you would like to see that you would like to talk about, please reach out to the SPP, and we're more than happily organize a session around those topics. I guess we're starting to explore, what the needs are of our community with regard to this topic. So if there's anything, either reach out to the SPP or connect with us on LinkedIn. Both Luciana, Matt, and myself are on the Scope 3 chapter LinkedIn group. So before we close, let me just thank our speakers, Saman and Leonardo. I think very interesting to see what you guys are working on, and very interesting also that these topics are also in business schools, and we're really trying to make things better, and we're trying to understand the structure in the chaos to help us move forward. So I think that's really good to see. So yeah, let me close there, and thank you very much. We'll be back after the summer holidays.